Hello, 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 and welcome to today's episode of Her Version. This podcast is dedicated to sharing stories of struggle and triumph, a platform that allows individuals to tell their truth in order to inspire and uplift others. For those of you that are new to this podcast and like content like this, make sure you hit that subscribe button, follow, like, and share. I am your host, Sabrina Victoria. Let's jump right in. Thank you so much for being here. For those of you that are already jumping on live, I see you. Thank you so much for being here and hanging out with us today. If you're watching us on the replay, make sure you hashtag replay so that we know that you were here and we can send you some love. The Her Version platform is built on storytelling and the understanding that many times our greatest learning experiences come from listening to other people's stories. Today, I am speaking with an amazing woman named Kayla. Kayla's journey of resiliency, healing, and regeneration has led her to her mission, which is to be the change that our world needs by taking transformative action with like-minded individuals for one single purpose: to change lives. Kayla believes that recovery is really a journey of discovery because the greatest thing you have to offer in life is your authentic self, and you are worth knowing. I am so excited to welcome Miss Kayla today. Welcome, lady. How are you? Do you think it's because fentanyl is so addictive that's why they're putting it in there so they'll come back?
So I thought about that. Like, I do think that like some dealers are like, I'm like, what is going through their mind? Like maybe like I thought about that. Like that could be a thing. They're getting it so cheap. So rather than like cutting it with something else, they're just cutting it with fentanyl. But like, I mean, the tiniest bit can kill you. And if you're not an opiate user, you don't even have a tolerance of this. And so then you're buying, a different drug and there's this fentanyl in it that is super potent and people are overdosing, and so, but there's so much of fentanyl coming in. Like I can't remember how, like we were in a meeting and they had seized, and pills too. Pills are being created and with fentanyl. So that's like another thing that's happening, so I just tell people like really beware of, like what you're doing, because it's like Russian roulette out there, and it's scary because like young kids, like the youth, that it's getting younger and younger of kids like experimenting. But what we're seeing is that like younger kids are going straight to like the hardcore stuff, and then I also think that plays a role of like things being laced, because if something's laced and you're, trying it, that's actually what happened to me when I was young. I was living with somebody who was older, and she was, addicted to drugs and in that lifestyle. And she almost like really was like really trying to get me to start to like use drugs. And at that point I was like, no, I only drink and smoke a little weed, and she just kept like pressing like to try cocaine. And I remember like the first time I tried cocaine and I was like, oh, I did not like that, like the way that it went up my nose, whatever. But then I did like the high, and then the next time she like literally, was trying to get me to do it, she was like, oh, it's the same thing that you did before, but it wasn't. It was methamphetamines. And I had no idea. And that was like a whole different thing. And I actually like spazzed out because, I was up for like days and I was freaking out and I was scared. And like, she tricked, I'm like, what is the purpose of that? And so like, it's really sad and disheartening, that seeing this in the community.
So she purposely did that?
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's so scary.
Yeah. And obviously I as I grew older, like knowing like, okay, this person is not your friend. But at that time,
do you guys do anything for preventative? Because I'm thinking of my son, like, as far as I know, my son hasn't done anything. He doesn't drink or anything. Him and his girlfriend are both like adamant, very healthy. They both gym rats, but you think of like, they could go to a party 2 years from now, he's only 18. He has his whole life. You go to a party when he's 20 or 21 and decide to try something. are you, or not you necessarily, but like your SF,
SFWN. Yeah.
are do you guys do classes for preventative just to educate young ones?
Yes. So I actually started taking over youth programs because that's what I'm all about is like, man, just prevention, education, and like supporting our young people to kind of keep them kind of veered from that, but also help them if that's kind of what they've gotten into. And so we do a lot of like educational trainings. I'm actually trying to become SFW and become a school vendor as well, because I think it's like super important just to educate kids. Because even like with the vapes and like what was going on with the vapes in the schools and with all the kids and like and they're vaping all kinds of drugs, you know, in these vapes as well. And so like that's another scary thing. So I think it's like prevention on educating the youth, like educating young people, but then educating parents, right? Like educating parents so that they can also educate their young people, you know, because it's really about them knowing what's out there so that they can make a better educated decision, right? Rather than just like you said, like a young person experiencing like
Yeah.
life. I'm going to a party for the first time. I'm going to, you know, because that happens and it's unfortunate, but that could be that one time that, you know, it's laced with something that you got from somebody that you trusted, because that's happened a lot too. And, you know, it's fentanyl.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I grew up in the DARE program. I'm a 1982 baby. I'm an elder millennial. Um, and that scared the hell out of me.
Yeah.
I know that I don't know if DARE even exists anymore. I know they went through a whole thing, but I've never done anything. I've never even taken a puff from a cigarette because of that training of like, just stay away, all of the like videos and the little speakers that came to speak just scared the shit out of me. Um, so I've never done any sort of drug. I've drank
Yeah.
in my past, but yeah, it's just there's nothing like that. They don't
Yeah.
do that in school anymore.
I know that's like the huge thing. And I'm like, you guys need to do this in school, and schools need to carry naloxone.
Yeah,
Like,
they need to do something because although, you know, like as far as I know, my son is good for
mhm,
now, but the only person that's telling him not to do that is his mother,
right.
which most children and possibly even my son, they don't, you know, once they hit a certain age, you're not really that smart anymore. You know,
Yeah.
once they're 17, like, but yeah, my son still loves me, he adores me, all of that, but he's just kind of like, yeah,
Yeah.
you don't know anything.
Yeah.
Um, so that's scary. You
It
know,
is.
that's
It
scary
is.
when they're going into this age group and I'm finally like breathing and I'm like, okay, I did it. We're good. Like he's 18. But then it's like, dude, like there's like parties and there's bars and there's like a whole, so I'm like, I'm not done yet. We're not done yet, you know? So that's interesting. I would love to see that get to a point where people, young ones, can be submitted to go and learn about the effects of this,
Drug facts.
just
Yeah.
knowing or realizing that it could be anything laced in anything. So just a little bit of, and that people lie, like that story about your friend, like that's devastating. I can't even imagine if like I think I'm doing one thing and then I end up doing another thing and it's like a blatant lie.
Mhm.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's
It was
so
really,
disheartening.
yeah. When I think back to that, like that was the first time I ever tried that drug, which I ended up actually, that's one of the drugs I ended up, you know, becoming addicted to and continuing to do. But it was like that moment, like, and she blatantly lied to me. And it was just like, I just felt so,
So scary.
yeah, yeah.
And
So, you
somebody
know,
needs to say something because what they don't know. And many times parents can speak, but I remember when I was that age, I wasn't necessarily always listening to everything my parents said.
yeah,
It comes, you know, once they hit, I think 15-ish, it's better if it's coming from an outside source.
100%.
You know, I tried to do most of my educating on with my child about drugs, alcohol, sex, all of that stuff between the age of like 12 and 15.
Mhm.
Because I preemptively remembered when I was 15, 16 years old, I wasn't even paying attention to my parents anymore. So granted, you know, I still do have those conversations with my son. He does listen, but whether or not he's like giving a shit, who knows?
Yeah.
About sex, like I talk very in depth because that's my story of single mom and like no birth control. We use the pull-out method, super stupid. So like I'm always talking about that. Drugs and alcohol, same. I'm in the sobriety community, as you already know. So pretty hefty with that. But at the same time, it's like they're people. They're
Yeah.
people, you know, and they have friends and they do things. So yeah, I would definitely be interested in seeing that get to a place where it was in schools or in some sort of a curriculum where we could send our children for a day or two where they can learn from people about this stuff that happens.
So that's actually one of my goals, because of
love that.
taking over youth programs is like, I am always like, we see a lot of treatment, right? Like we see a lot of that, but like where I want to put more focus to into prevention.
Yes.
And prevention really starts with that like education. And you're absolutely right, because I think that when youth hit that age, it's like they really do need an outside source.
Yeah.
And so like what I love is like I have a team of like also some young people in recovery, and like having them like kind of give those facts, but then also share their experience. There's like more of like a respect to what a young person is hearing coming from a person they feel like, okay, this person is still young, I can relate to them. And then like hearing not just like the fact aspect of it, but like, hey, this is some of my experience, and not coming from a place where it's like, I'm trying to like tell you how to live your life, I'm trying to tell you not to go have fun, but like just be cautious because this is what's going on. So that you have that thought when you're at that party and there's that moment, and in the back of your mind you're like, oh my gosh, like I remember, this moment where,
Exactly.
yeah, I heard that this is what's going on in this fentanyl and the drugs, blah blah blah. And then also having those tools, right, like naloxone, which is to reverse a drug overdose, and it won't harm anybody, right? So like I could spray naloxone in my nose, it's not going to do a thing to me. But if there was a fentanyl or opioid overdose, it will save somebody's life,
Wow.
And so it's so important for people to know that that's out there. There's also like we've been trying to get them to pass the fentanyl testing strips, which they didn't this year, but we're trying to get it passed again through legislation. But
Or you
I
can
think
test your drugs.
where you can test your drugs, because that is a vital tool, right? Like if you know that we're not going to stop people from using drugs, right? Like that's just not going to happen.
Oh,
But
that's
maybe you can
so
save lives
interesting.
and keep people safe, right? So if somebody's like, man, like they're experimenting and they smoke marijuana, or that, whatever it is, there's this strip that you can test, and just to make sure that your drugs aren't laced with fentanyl,
Yeah.
So I think that these like tools, which is all considered like harm reduction, because that's what we're doing. We're meeting people where they're at, right? Like
Yeah.
when I went out for spring break, I wasn't in the club and at the bars saying like, don't drink, don't do drugs, like recovery. I was like, hey, we know you're out here having a good time for spring
Yeah.
break. Like, let me just educate you a little. And we was so receptive. Like
Yeah.
people loved it. And I met nurses and and they're like, oh my gosh, like this is incredible. We actually had like news stations come out and cover that, because like people were just like, wow, like this is so great. Like this is going to not only is responding to the challenge, but in a way that's more like educational and like putting tools in people's hands that's going to help them to keep other people, safe.
Totally. That's awesome. What's some advice that you'd give to females who are struggling with the same thing you struggled with? They know they want to be a good mother. They can feel it, they can envision it, but it's taken that step. What would be some advice you'd give to people who are hiding it like you were?
Yeah, I think like the biggest thing is like being honest, like being honest with yourself, like, knowing that like any change that really is gonna begin to occur has to begin with that like honest moment, that honest conversation. Like I had to actually like get real with myself and be like, man, like, yeah, you want this and this is what you want, and just acknowledge where I was at in that moment, right? And just know that, man, like change is possible for any and everyone, right? Like, and that's a process, and it's not that you're bad like as you are right now. It's just that, you know, hey, I want to be better, and there's some things that are keeping me or blocking me from getting better, and now I need to start to deal with those things so that I can be the best me that I can be, right? Like God created you uniquely. He designed you with incredible gifts and a heart of love, and it's like, how do I access that and then be able to just, you know, give that out, right? And become that person, and be patient, man. Like change is a process. It is growth is a process, you know, and you're going to ride the emotions of all of that. And I think the biggest thing too is like sometimes when things are falling apart, we seem to have this like, oh my God, my life, like this is horrible, blah, blah. Whereas like I now know, like embrace that, because when things are really falling apart, like you're able to kind of like now see what needs to change, and it's really that opportunity to now make that difference, right? So like when things are revealed, then I can work on them. If I don't know that there's a problem, or I don't know, you know, like what's going on, there's nothing that I can do or that I'm willing to do. But when things are kind of breaking down, I'm like, oh, that's because you're getting ready to be built back up.
Got it. Makes sense. I love it. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for being here and hanging out with us and sharing so eloquently your story and your journey and everything that you have been through. For those of you that are watching live, we appreciate you hanging out with us over the past hour. This community is everything to me, and having women like Kayla who understand the process of healing from our stories and teaching others through our stories is the only reason why this podcast is expanding the way it is. So I appreciate you, Kayla.
Thank you so much.
I appreciate the audience who's here and enjoying this content. So the Her Version community is expanding every single day and is filled with females who are striving to do better than they did yesterday. For those of you that are new to this podcast and like content like this, make sure you subscribe, follow, like, and share. If you have an amazing story to share of struggle to triumph, be sure to reach out to me here or at herversion.life. I am your host, Sabrina Victoria, and I am so honored to be here on a platform that allows people to share their truth and inspire others